Now, I met a lady today by the name of Mel Lecky. Now, Mel Lecky represented Australia at the Paralympic Games in Beijing. She also today interrupted the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister was making a speech about her support for the disabled in this country. Today is a day commemorating of celebrating those with a disability around the country. Now, clearly, the Prime Minister's aim was to stand up and was to talk about the NDIS, a scheme that, apart from the pilot money, there is no money for it after. However, as we get ready to get into an election campaign, get ready for the NDIS to seem like a fully funded, fully planned and coming to a hospital near you scheme. But that's an argument for another time. Mel, however, decided to interrupt the Prime Minister today to say she doesn't want any more money from the government. She is a paraplegic. She does not want any more money from the government. However, she would like the ability to not just collect the pension, which is about $800 a fortnight, but also to be able to go off and earn money for herself in a job on top of that payment. Now, Mel makes it very clear. She doesn't want extra money. She doesn't want extra funding. She doesn't want an extra handout. But she wants to use the pension that she gets as being a disabled person. She will use that for her care. She will use that to take care of herself as she is in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. Here was a person on this very day, a day where the Prime Minister and opposition leader are talking big talk about how they're going to help people with a disability. And here's a woman who doesn't have a dodgy back. Here's a woman who doesn't have some sort of a complaint that may come and go. This woman is not rorting the system. She is a woman who will be in her wheelchair for the rest of her life, and she simply wants to change the system that penalises her by 50 cents for every dollar that she gets in her pension once she starts earning more than $150 on top of her pension every 2 weeks. Now, I understand that the way our system works is that the more you earn, the less you get in a pension. But this is not a condition that she is going to somehow be able to get out of. This is not a condition that is going to go away with years and years of therapy. She is in a wheelchair for life. But she doesn't want money from the government. She doesn't want billions of dollars in promises. She simply wants the right to work. And I found it fascinating today that the Prime Minister said, "I'll take on your concerns and I'll discuss the issue." But what a wonderful way that the media and often our politicians brush aside the real issues of people who are on disability pensions. These are people who need the money from the pension to deal with their disability, but they also are punished if they want to go off and work to make their life more comfortable. Now, that's not a fair system. And that's a system that can be changed, and it can be changed tomorrow, and it will cost us nothing. Instead, the Prime Minister wants to spend billions of dollars that she's not saying where it's coming from for an NDIS, a scheme that I support. But if you've got somebody who presumably will be using the NDIS saying, yeah, great idea, but can I also just go and get a job? What's wrong with that as a system? So let's talk about what happened today and this heckler, it's not a heckler, she's a Paralympian, who confronted the Prime Minister today. I spoke about her just moments ago. Her simple position is, I'm on the pension, I'm a paraplegic, I will be for the rest of my life. I want to use the pension to take care of everything that's associated with me being in a wheelchair, but I want the right to go off and work and not be penalised as a result of it. Here's what Mel had to say when she confronted the Prime Minister in Sydney today.
Prime Minister, are you aware that disability pension is nearly 57% of national minimum wage? Unless you're blind or vision impaired, people with permanent disabilities, like myself, are only allowed to earn a maximum of $152 per fortnight. I will never be able to work full-time, but because of every dollar income I earn, it reduces my pension by 50% or 50 cents. I would need to work for a minimum of 27 hours every single week just to equal minimum wage.
Now, we'll get into the Prime Minister and the broader comments that she was making about disability. But, Derryn, how do you feel about a Paralympian? She doesn't want to rort the system. She just wants to get the assistance from the wider community, and I'm happy that that's where my taxes go. But then she wants to be able to go off and earn on top of it without being penalised. What do you think?
She's right, 100% right. I mean, she can earn like $80 a week, and that is all. The thing about the whole NDIS and the fact that they're still trying to find where the money's coming from, if you look at it now, it should have been in 20 years ago. All those carers who've given millions and millions of hours free and willingly so. They're out there doing all their hard work, and they see the NDIS as a big hope down the track, but it's years away. I know we have some sort of test group for 20,000 people in the next year, but look, it's a terrible system as it stands. I talked to somebody over the weekend who, a mother who's getting older, and they said, we're going to die. Who looks after my kids then? And these are people who have dedicated 40, 50 years of their lives to disabled children who suddenly become disabled adults, and they can't work it out, and they can't cope.
Now, Janine, what do you think about the idea of the pension and who gets to be able to earn money on top of that? Look, we're not talking about a bad back here. It's a woman in a wheelchair, will be for the rest of her life. Surely this is, well, I believe part of the social contract is that you can take care of that person, but if they want to supplement their income, what's the problem?
Well, I agree with you. In this case, it sounds fair to do it. It sounds unfair not to allow her to earn more and gain independence. I don't know where you start along that route, where you go, because disability is a very broad area. Certainly in these cases, I think it sounds good. I mean, it's one of the comments said this week. I mean, it is a sign of a decent society, a first world country, that we look after people who are disabled. And I think most Australian taxpayers would prefer to see the money lose a bit of taxpayer money on that.
Mark, am I being too touchy-feely here about this particular woman's circumstance?
Oh, well, we have a tax system, and it's a long-standing principle that if you earn more private income, you lose government benefit. That's not to say that someone who's disabled is not worthy of special consideration, but it's a feature of our political system since Adam was a boy, and it got worse in the Howard years, that the interests and lobby groups who've got the biggest political punch get the biggest concessions. Now, I don't mind having a little bet from time to time, and I wouldn't mind betting that you, Paul, Derryn there in Melbourne, other people talking about this today were relatively silent when the Howard government brought in the policy 10 years ago of basically allowing every self-funded retiree in Australia not to pay any income tax. That would have been clapped in on talkback radio and other places as deserving for people, even though they're wealthy, quite wealthy, that, build Australia and all that sort of rhetoric about the aged. In fact, at that time and every moment in the last 10 years, disabled people were probably more worthy of the tax concession, the scarce use of government money, but they didn't have much political punch, and we're talking about it tonight not exactly on the merit of it, but because a woman created a media scene by interrupting the Prime Minister's speech and asking a question. So there's a lot of this that's rubbish, a lot of it that's inconsistent, and people who say, quite rightly, that the disabled deserve a better go financially perhaps should have been a lot louder 10 years ago when one of the worst tax concessions ever was introduced, and now we've got a situation with people who would earn many, many, many times more money than this woman. Self-funded retirees, courtesy of the Howard government, don't pay any tax at all. So let's get fair income, let's get fair in principle, and not sort of pretend that there's an unlimited pool of government money to be tossed out to anyone who makes the news tonight.
And isn't the whole thing about this that the reason she was interrupting a press conference is because Julie Gillard has put it at the forefront? We are talking about this, we are moving towards doing something, and it's really those state premiers who are dragging their heels. Perhaps she should be...
Well, I want to give Derryn the chance because, Derryn, you were on Talk Radio 10 years ago. I wasn't. Where were you 10 years compared to now and what Mark just said?
Yeah, I would say to Mark on this one here, I can see your point. You're saying, OK, because somebody's made a stink today, it's getting the attention, we're talking about it tonight. But surely, the government today, they've brought up the NDIS. It's a great thing that they've introduced it, and I hope it goes through and gets bipartisan support. But surely, after this woman's brought this to our attention today, the government should be saying, yeah, you're right, we are wrong. Forget what Howard did or didn't do. Let's do it now. Get the kudos for it. I'm happy for them to have the kudos in an election year, but just bloody well do it. It can be done.
Yes, but it's easy to say, let's forget what Howard did if you were silent at the time. The reality of running a government, of running a budget, Derryn, is there's only a limited amount of tax concession money. And you can only do so much with it for all the people in the country who want it. You have to make decisions about who's the most worthy. And in large part, the argument you're putting tonight, the actual horse bolted 10 years ago when a mob who weren't deserving of these massive concessions got the loot, and the woman you're talking about tonight, because she got on TV, for the last 10 years, her and people like her have missed out. So it's all relative. You can't make these decisions like there's an unlimited pot of money at the end of the rainbow.
Mark, I think I said, Mark, that for the past I said the NDIS should have come in 20 years ago. I don't care if it's a Labor government or a Liberal government, disabled people have been disenfranchised for 20, 30, 40 years. So I don't give a damn which government's in power. If you've got it now, you've got the excuse, you've got the added attention with an election year coming up, and get bipartisan support and just do it.
But also stunts is how you can peers through to forums like this where, to be honest, and it's insensitive of us or unknowing of us that I wouldn't have opened the show with this unless I was aware of her circumstance. I wasn't aware of her circumstance until today, and I had the chance to talk to her about it. And what I'm advocating and what she's asking for doesn't cost any more money.
Yes, it does.
But how does it cost any more money first? She keeps their $850 and then a fortnight.
She's not paying as much tax as people in a comparable situation. I mean, the income tax system is based on the idea that you earn more income, you pay more tax, and as you earn more income, for people on benefits, there's a loss of government money. It's called the tax transfer system.
Yeah, but somebody in a wheelchair, I'm happy for them to get the exemption to the system, though.
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
But why wouldn't you be?
But you're also happy. I'm taking by your silence on this issue 10 years ago. You're also happy for those self-funded retirees to get a big bucket of money.
10 years ago, I was doing a music radio show.
Governments today have a role in doing budgets,
and I'm sure 10 months ago you were happy for some other mob to get a concession. It's all about priorities,
and that's what
equity.
A budget's about.
What have I done?
It is.
That's what a federal budget's about. They
Well,
can do it today.
I'm just saying it's a soft touch to get on TV because the woman's made the news today, and not put this in the context of all the unnecessary tax concessions that were handed out over the past 10 years and say, oh, this woman's deserving. If she is deserving, nominate. Who loses theirs?
Baby bonus.
So it can be funded.
Yeah,
okay,
baby
you've
bonus.
nominated
Baby
that.
bonus, first and
I don't know.
Mark, how can you bring it, Mark Latham, how can you just bring it back, everything back to the Howard government? You bring it all back to the Howard government. Let's deal with today. I don't recall 10 years ago everything that John Howard did do or didn't do, and Howard hated me so much from my radio program, he wouldn't come on the program. Fraser banned me for 2.5 years. So don't try to paint me as somebody who didn't attack the Liberal government. Journalists should be against whoever is in power. That is our job.
Well, that's just totally irrelevant what you've had to say there. I'm asking you, Derryn, not to tell us your history with Malcolm Fraser, but tell us your history in identifying in radio and in your books and these other places tax concessions that weren't worthy, so that money can be freed up to fund the worthy today in the disability support system. And I've said that I'll have a little bit.
I haven't written a book, about the taxation system.
You haven't. Well, you seem to know a lot about it, which indicates perhaps you're blowing it out of your backside because you know nothing at all.
Hang on, but all right. Can you know anything at any time? The hashtag's PMLive, email pmlive@skynews.com.au. Let's move on to the Essential Poll, which is an Essential Poll which was released today about perceptions about the AWU, who went well out of it and who didn't handle it that well. Here is the perception of it, and just as Mark has been arguing for a long time here, which is that pretty obvious here, is that, OK, good and poor, but still, majority there in favour of the Prime Minister, the way she handled it. Very negatively against the way that the opposition had handled it, and we can't let the media off as well, who got a pretty big whacking in all of it as well. There's a lot that's been in all of this, and by the way, how does it change things? Well, no difference. 60% of people saying no difference. By the end of Thursday, and without reopening the whole intricacies of this and that, and I played on Thursday the example of what you were saying about the law in Western Australia on our radio the radio program. But at the end of this, do you think that the Essential Poll reflects where normal people are on this, which is that the majority were unmoved by it, and if they were moved, they thought negatively of the opposition about it?
Yeah, I think that's probably a correct viewpoint, but probably in the truth of it, you analyse who ethically made the biggest number of mistakes, who in fact has made the biggest number of mistakes, who should be in the dock. It's the media, because the reporting of this has been disgraceful. It has been even more error-ridden than normal, which is saying something. Error upon error, mistake piled upon mistake. I'm quickly reaching the conclusion the faster the internet does clean out newspapers and they're forced to close, the faster the internet does clean out nightly news bulletins and they're forced to close, the better off our democracy will be, because there's so much rubbish, and this is a wonderful case study, the AWU, so much rubbish and misreporting and just vacuous stuff that comes through the media.
Well, while we're talking
that they really should.
Sweeping generalisation about the media. Not everybody is there. I don't think you want to see all journalists out of a job because of that.
No, I think what should happen is that
Could you
people...
just qualify that there were
people
certain
through
elements
the
were
internet
there?
could sign up to accounts where they receive that novelty of straight factual reporting information and they subscribe to columnists and commentators of their choice. And it cuts out the middleman and so much of the rubbish we've got in the media. I'm actually now writing a book about the media incompetence on the AWU matter. It's going to have to be a big book because I've got piles and piles of misreporting, fallacies, absolute garbage. I think Ray Martin will actually get a pretty good mention based on his performance last Thursday. This doyen of Australian journalism, serious allegations against the Prime Minister, big parliamentary debate. The opposition saying the Prime Minister of the country is the crook. This doyen, this veteran of Australian journalism, what was his big debating point on this program?
Paul, why do you sit there and let Mark Latham talk this bloody rubbish that he goes on about? I mean, he should write a book.
Because it's better than your views on tax. That's why. and Ray Martin's big view, the fashion sense of Julie Bishop.
Okay.
That she was dressed up like the mother of the bride. Well, wasn't that a heavy point?
Okay, well, Derryn, whack away.
Where's Alex Perry when you need him?
My apologies for not stepping in. Dad, go for it.
No, I just think, I listen to Mark Latham saying, the sooner newspapers close down, the sooner we get all our news from the internet. I presume that's the same internet that Julia Gillard says is full of nut jobs and misogynists, and there are a few of them out there as well. But the way you talk, when you write your columns, you get freedom to write your columns, and the AFR and all those sorts of things, and on Crikey. But Mark, you know, I came on here thinking, yeah, OK, it's Mark Latham, I'll humour him, but you talk such crap at times. I think, why am I sitting out here in a studio in Melbourne trying to listen to this burble you go on with, and people think that you're very learned. Here's Mark Latham. You're a failed leader of the Labor Party. You're now hacking around in the side there, and you think you can make a big name for yourself on Paul Murray's show. I watched when Paul Murray was in Brisbane that night trying to host his show, and Janine trying to keep you guys under control. A couple of mad dogs going at each other, and it demeans you. It's demeaning me now. I find you pathetic.
Do you feel better now, Derryn? Why don't you throw in shame, shame, shame?
Yeah, see,
that was always a beauty. Throw that one in.
Yeah, you know why? You're so accurate. I never ever said that. That was actually Steve. Yeah, that was Steve Vizard doing Hunch. So as an accurate journalist and columnist, you don't even know the sources and where it's coming from. I did not ever say that.
Now, I'm interested in this quite frequently, and Derryn, I want to know, I'd like to know here, is that I get plenty of people who always on Twitter say, well, why don't you interrupt and why don't you yell at Mark more? Because he's in the middle of a point. That's why I generally don't jump in the middle of people here. People think that I don't jump on you enough here.
Well, look what happened to Derryn when I jumped in. I was collateral damage.
I actually try not to interrupt people, and you'll find tonight I haven't interrupted Derryn. I didn't interrupt Chris Kenny that night, but if others choose to interrupt, I normally think I've got the right to finish my point. Strange notion, that, but...
what about taking breath so they can get in?
Yeah.
I've made my point. Derryn's made his point, which people can take it at face value, and shame, shame, shame.